I'm Lexi Davis, a love embodiment coach who helps people create a love that feels like home, and I'm here to bring more romance and playfulness into the world. I'm also an international retreat host, vibe curator, and human connector. I serve people through my business, Alive to Enjoy, and this podcast where I invite guests from around the world to sprinkle their wisdom and expand your perspective so you can create the deepest love you possibly can reach in this lifetime. I also want you to live the most joyous life, whatever that looks like to you, and I hope that this slice of the internet brings you lots of smiles and helps you keep your heart open. Thank you for choosing Heart Snuggles to be in your ears each week, and I'm so glad you're here with me. Welcome, Heart Snugglers. We're so grateful you're here with us today, and I'm excited for another chat about some feminine energy and womb magic. I'm excited to see what happens. And to start off, I would love to ask you, what was the last random act of kindness that someone did for you?
Oh, that someone did for me. Oh, I think we went out to dinner, my friend and I, the other day, and her boyfriend works there and he paid for our dinner, which was really, yeah, it was really sweet of him. I think that's probably it. Yeah.
Cute.
Yeah.
I
Super
love
sweet.
that act of providership.
Yeah, me too. We love a man who provides for the women.
Yes.
It's yeah, so nice.
It's on my list. Like, my man will come to dinners and pay for everyone and for all the girls. So I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
So sweet. So sweet.
And go ahead and give them a little intro about you and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Rebecca. I am the founder of Blume Womb. Blume Womb really is a platform and community to support women in learning more about their cyclical nature through menstrual cycle awareness, but also through just embodying the feminine through different practices and tools. But really, mainly, I do menstrual cycle coaching in order to help women just be more embodied in their feminine in that way.
Yes, it's so important and it's so crazy. I remember starting to learn this and I was shocked how little, we were taught in schools and just from our parents, and it's so impactful. So I'm really excited to
Yeah.
share this with other women. So what does being in your feminine mean to you, or being in that feminine essence?
That's such a good question. It's so funny. I always ask my clients this on like our first call and then on our last call to see like what the comparison is because yeah, everyone has a different answer to it. And I think that's also a question that many women don't know how to answer fully. I think the being in your feminine, the biggest thing is being connected to your body and being connected to your intuition in that way, which I think so many women have not learned how to do, and they are very in their head and they're very logical. And so being your feminine really allowing to lead with your body and with your heart versus your logic and your mind. And there's obviously so much more when it comes to being your feminine and what that means, but that I think is like the core essence of it, really.
I agree. Yeah. And I find that a lot of women, like, I used to think that I didn't have an intuition. I remember one of my friends was super intuitive in high school, and I would always go to her and be like, what do I do? Because I didn't think I had one. And then I realized it was like, oh no, I'm not trusting my intuition. I'm not
Mm,
trusting that voice. And so,
yeah.
yeah, as well, take women on that journey of, because we all have it. It's like the best free tool in the world.
It's the most accurate source there is out there too. And like, why don't we trust it? Because we weren't taught to trust it. But yeah, it is once you tap into it, you're like, wow, like I really am this beautiful oracle that can just navigate my life from my own authority versus anyone else's. Yeah.
Yes.
So vital, so special.
It's so good. And I'd love to know your journey about, have you always been in your feminine, or what kind of inspired you to get into this work?
Yeah, no, I've definitely not always been my feminine. I was very much in my masculine, especially when it came to like work and business. Like I was very much just like in the hustle and the grind, really neglecting my own pace, my own need for just more rest, more nurturing, more being in my body. And then also when it came to dating and relationships, I was very much, I'm independent. I don't need no man. Like I can be my own man. Like I had that attitude around it. Like I would literally go on dates and be like, I'm gonna pay. Like that kind of energy, which I've very much shifted out of. But yeah, it definitely wasn't always in yeah, embodying my feminine the way I am now. I think there's a lot of not trusting myself, like what we were just saying, like not trusting myself or my intuition or my body in that sense. And so there had to be this like this strong shield or independence that protected me from the world, I guess you could say, because I didn't fully trust myself or trust the world in that sense. So yeah, that I think really brought out this need to be in my masculine versus allowing and trusting my feminine. So yeah, I've not always been so in touch with my feminine as I am now, for sure.
Yeah, I'm the same. I grew up with a single dad. I was super my
Mhm.
masculine.
Yeah.
I was just telling my friend the story the other day. I wore the same jacket every day for 2 weeks to school, and I went over
Mhm.
to my best friend's house, and her mom bought me a jacket. She's, I didn't know if you didn't have money, and I was like, what's wrong with wearing the same jacket every day? I didn't
Mhm.
understand these feminine principles about taking care of yourself and dressing different,
Mhm.
and I was all the things you said too. So in my masculine in every way. So what inspired you to start wanting to be in your feminine?
I burnt myself out being in my masculine because it was not my nature to be that way. I
Mhm.
think I very much, yeah, I just was living so out of alignment in these subtle ways that I didn't even realize. And then because there's so many areas in my life where I was just like pushing or forcing or just trying to fit in a way that just wasn't in alignment with myself, I burnt myself out because I was like, there's just this constant resistance. And so I took a full year away from working. Like I was doing network marketing for 4 or 5 years and found a lot of success in it. And I was like, I'm going to take just like a year off from working. And so I really put those businesses aside and then I found menstrual cycle tracking and that changed my whole entire life and just learning to live in my cycle. And then I was like, I need to teach more women about this. And so I started a page, I started Blume Womb and yeah, and then here we are.
Ah,
Yeah.
I always loved how just the answers, it just comes to you and when you listen and are open to it. Was there a certain person that introduced you, or I always love to know?
It was funny because my best friend at the time, she was pregnant. And so she kind of inspired me to look into becoming a doula because I've always been interested in becoming a doula. And so I was looking into different programs to like study all of that. And then I found a program, but that program actually also offered a program around the menstrual cycle. And so I was reading through the landing page and I was like, no, this other like the menstrual cycle program, learning about all of these things and like understanding your feminine qualities in these ways. Like I was like, this is what I want to learn about. This is what I feel like would help me most and feels most resonant. And so through, I guess, like wanting to become a doula, it was like, yeah, we're in the field, but not exactly what I wanted to do, or not that I didn't know, I guess. And
Yeah.
then I found that, yeah, the other course, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And then I started learning more about it, and I was like, yeah, this is it. This
Mm,
is the life work that I want to dive into. So yeah.
yeah. That trust that lit you up and you're like, okay, yes. And that's what
Yeah,
I'm sure what you help women
totally.
follow.
Yeah. And just trusting the little pings. Wait, I'm interested in this. And then seeing where that leads you, it just always leads you to where you have to be. And like just yeah, trusting that journey and following those pings.
So good. Okay, so how do you find that women are disconnected from their wombs?
Well, yeah, there's so many different ways I feel like women are disconnected to their wombs. I think, well, one, obviously, women who grow up like coming of age girls, we don't learn about our menstrual cycle and that there's 4 phases and that you can track it and that you only get pregnant or you can only get pregnant 5 to 6 days a month. That's knowledge that I just learned about in the last few years. That's wild to me. It's like, how did we not know this about our bodies? And so I think through that, the like misinformation or just not having any information around it, there's a disconnect because we never learn about our womb and our cycle. And no one teaches us. And then through that too, it's we live in a society that is very much take birth control and kind of block this out and has very much neglected the beauty and the magic of having a cycle and having a bleed that actually is so vital to our health and to our well-being and to being an intuitive woman that is also very much in touch with her body. And so I think through that, we're just very much programmed to not look at that. We're very much programmed to neglect it, to hide it. And so I think we're really in this like there's just this new wave happening right now where I think we're all just like learning about this means learning about our womanhood, which in return means learning about who we are in this way that no one has ever shared it with us, and being in this world that is very masculine driven, we now get to experience what it means to be a woman in a world where we can fully embrace that versus neglect it and think that something is wrong with us, or taking birth control to neglect that, or whatever else it is, you know? So yeah, I think we're really just learning how to reconnect to our womb, and that is it's unfamiliar territory for most women. And I think cycle tracking is just one of the first and like simplest practices to start connecting back to that part of ourselves. So that's why I just love teaching about it so much, because it's you think it's just about tracking your cycle and understanding where you're at, but there's so much more. It just uncovers this whole journey about who you are as a woman, and understanding yourself in ways that no one, like, you would never realize that that would come to surface once you start cycle tracking.
Yes, yes. So for those who don't know what cycle tracking is, can you kind of dive into the
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so cycle tracking, I think a lot of times when we think about cycle tracking, like when I first, like my first ever way of cycle tracking was like using an app and just putting in my period, and then the app would like tell me, okay, 28 days from now you're gonna have your bleed again. And so that was like the very basics of cycle tracking. Now, that's a great start. However, it only really tells you when you're bleeding, and it's not actually allowing you to tap into your body every single day. And that's really what cycle tracking is about, is we're tuning in to our cycle and to our womb and our body every single day to see what is present, whether it's our moods, our cycle signs, which can include whether it's like you having higher libido or appetite changes, or maybe breast tenderness, or maybe cramping, whatever it is. There's different cycle signs, good and bad ones. And then, yeah, and we're really tracking just like every single day what is present for us in our bodies, how are we feeling, what are our energy levels like. And with that, we can then feel what phase we're in. And there's 4 different phases in our cycle. And this is what I call level 1 cycle tracking. Level 2 cycle tracking is very much about tracking your cervical mucus and your basal body temperature, as well as your cervix height. And that really gives you a firm indicator of if you're in your fertile phase, using that as like a contraception or conception method. But when I work with clients, I start with level 1 cycle tracking, which is tuning into your cycle daily, and by tuning into your body and seeing what's present, to feel the subtle energy shifts and the subtle cycle signs that are present, so that you can pinpoint where you're at in your cycle without, like, level 2 cycle tracking when it comes to basal body temperature and like cervical mucus tracking it can be very logical, because you're taking it on these data points of your body versus tuning into your body and being like, wait, what's going on here? What's present? And so that's really, when I talk about cycle tracking, that's what I do every single day, what I teach my clients, and what I wish everyone would do every single day, is just really tune in to their cycle daily, and mark down what they're experiencing, so they can see where they're at in their cycle and then live accordingly to that and support themselves in that way.
Yeah, it's like it's crazy too, because the world is based on a 24-hour cycle, and ours is a whole month. And so
Mm-hmm.
how do you help support women that are entrepreneurs to align that with their work?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Really, the biggest thing is just understanding how in the first half of our cycle we are more outgoing, more social. We're more willing to maybe be on camera or having calls or whatever, like those tasks that require us to be more present and more social, doing all those in the first half of the cycle, and then the second half of the cycle doing all of the back end stuff, so that in our second half of our cycle, because of the way our hormone levels are, we're more able to take on tasks that are more logical and more inward. So that's why it's really great to then do back end stuff where you aren't really communicating with other people or having to be on calls or whatever. So personally, I like try not to take calls the week before my bleed, because that's when I'm in my deep luteal phase. And I personally, it will be too much if I have a call or 2 calls a day. Like, I can feel my energy levels then not being in a good place. And so I try to block that off my calendar as much as I can. And then obviously the days that I bleed, I the first day or two, I try to not work, which I know isn't always possible, but doing it to the best of your ability and just really honoring that need for rest and just rejuvenation. And also in that, it's the more that we do that, the better that we can then show up in the other parts of our cycle. If we keep just going, we're like, okay, not allowing that rest to happen, it doesn't allow full rejuvenation for us either. And we really need that. Like it's really vital and it actually will allow you to show up better, like I was saying. So that's like in short, like for women that are entrepreneurs, I think really just understanding how these different parts of your cycle can support your business versus thinking that it is something that is going to hinder you from showing up in your business, because it won't and it shouldn't if you allow yourself to meet your cycle where it's at versus resist it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's so supportive to know that and plan out in a month in advance. Like we actually
Yeah,
better to do that because once you like stay in tune with your body, you understand your energy levels, you know when to plan your launches or plan your big events or
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is really helpful. And just knowing that your cycle can really be this container that holds you as a woman versus it being, again, like something that hinders you from showing up fully. It's like the opposite, really. It allows you to fully show up in the way that, yeah, is necessary in that very moment or in that very phase of your cycle. And it really is this supportive container for your feminine to flow in and feel safe in and relax in. So really seeing that and shifting your perspective to understanding that it is this thing that holds you and it's a safety net in that way, I think really allows us to then be able to flourish and bloom with it, you know?
yeah, yeah, it's definitely something I want to get more connected with. I feel like sometimes I'm really good about it and then sometimes I'm not.
Hmm.
So what is your way that you stay really consistent with it?
Yeah, I would say it definitely took me a while to stay consistent with it. And I will say there's still some months where it's hard for me because there's just a factor of the outside world. I don't have control over that, you know? And so in that, it's like, how can I then show up as much as I can for myself in my inner world so that I feel supported. And I think just the biggest thing is, okay, if let's say we have to, like within our business, let's say we have to work, we have to show up on calls, or we have to show up for an event and we're like in deep luteal or about to start bleeding, we are bleeding. Really then acknowledging, okay, how can I show up in all these, or how can I nurture myself in all these other areas? How can I give myself more sleep? How can I give myself supportive food that helps me during this phase? How can I move in a way, exercise in a way that supports me? Like all these other areas that then allows me to show up for my work so that I'm not completely exhausted. But just, yeah, finding the balance in that I think is really vital because it's not always going to be the perfect cycle where we're like no cycle is going to be perfect. Every cycle is going to have their own challenges and every cycle is going to be so unique. And so it's not so much about trying to find the perfect cycle and trying to make it the perfect cycle, I guess, but more about finding that balance within yourself to be able to show up for life in all these ways by just knowing how to hold yourself in it, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
and show up in these areas. Yeah.
I was gonna say it's no, I think when we put that pressure on ourselves, that's especially for me, it's when I like do even worse with it. And instead it's
Hmm.
okay when I'm having more awareness of, oh, I'm in this phase, this is actually what I need in this moment. It's like we can just help ourselves, like you were just saying, to when you do have to show up for a call, do the like extra self-resourcing. So I think
Yeah,
it's so beautiful and
totally.
really helps take that pressure to like, I have to cycle check every day, and if I miss it, then back.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's not about perfection. It's really about consistency with it. And yeah, and just meeting yourself where you're at over and over again. And again, that's going to look different every single time. And just trusting yourself in that, and trusting your cycle that it's got you, you know? Yeah. It's just building that relationship.
Yes, it's a relationship. I think that's such a good point that we sometimes, I mean, I'm still so shocked by the women that they're like, oh, it's my period. Like I have that time of the month. And oh, it makes me so sad having that
I
kind of
know.
relationship with your body. So how do you help someone like really see the sacredness of it when they're
Mm,
still so disconnected?
yeah, that's a really beautiful question. I think I really start by seeing by allowing them to see how every part of their cycle is sacred. Because I think a lot of times we focus so much on, for a woman that is only that has that viewpoint on their bleed, they don't have a connection to their cycle. And so in order for us to honor our bleed, we have to honor every part of our cycle. And so teaching them on what it means to really commune with our cycle all throughout our month, so that when our bleed comes, it's not this one big almost like shock where it's like, oh my God, my bleed's here again. Look, I don't want to be like, I don't want to have my bleed, whatever it is. Like it's a way of then celebrating the end and the beginning of your cycle. So really the way that that looks is just, okay, understanding, yeah, again, like what the cycle looks like all throughout the month, like what your follicular phase looks like, your ovulation phase, your luteal phase, honoring yourself in each of these different phases, the different versions of you that arise in these different phases. I work a lot with the feminine archetypes and how they correlate to the different phases of our cycle. And by honoring and communing with our cycle throughout the month, and when our bleed comes, again, it's like this big celebration of being like, okay, we're here to complete the cycle, allow this death and rebirth process to happen. And through that, there's so much more just like excitement, I feel like, to experience your bleed, because it really just allows you to have so much more sacredness in that process, like just seeing it as that sacred process and being like, wow, this is such a beautiful thing that I get to release and call in old and new energies, if that makes sense. So I think that's the biggest thing. And so that's why cycle tracking in itself is, a lot of times women will experience bleeds that, if they have experienced heavy bleeds or cramping or whatever, they start cycle tracking, and that those symptoms minimize because there's less resistance to their bleed. There's more of that balance outlook on it. So yeah, I would say that. And anytime like a woman tells me they're bleeding, I'm like, congratulations. Like I'm just trying to shift the mindset on it for everyone, being like, celebrate it. Like, congratulations. Like, that is incredible that you're bleeding and that you're going through this incredible death and rebirth process. That's needed. We all need it, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for me, if I'm not like day by day tracking and I can feel my bleed's about to come, then I bleed. I'm like, oh yay, it's like my permission slip to relax.
Yes,
And
that
also
too.
we're so in tune, like the veil is so thin during that time. So I know like I can
Mhm.
be super reflective and it
Mhm.
just like, yeah, to me it feels so good. So
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you know the book Wild Power, the teachings by the author, Alexandra Pope and Shawnee, I forget her last name, but I've taken a course from them, and they talk about the five chambers of menstruation and how there's this almost like this vision quest that we go through with our bleed. And if we really tune in, and this is for the majority of women, we keep going with our lives as if it's just another regular day, and we keep our schedules open and we try to attend to all of our to-do lists. But if we actually sit back and take time in silence, take time to ourselves, be like just hermit from the world, you can really feel yourself going through this process, these five chambers of menstruations, of really going through your own little vision quest. And like you're saying, that the veil is so much thinner during this time, and it is such an incredible time to tune in and, one, really release all the things that are no longer serving you through your bleed. Like your blood holds emotions, energetics, and it's so intuitive, it's so smart in that way. And so supporting it by you also being in that state of mind, and just, yeah, and just being really attentive and intentional with it. And then with that too, it's like you get to vision quest for your life and like what it is that you want to bring in and what the answers are, like really becoming the oracle through your bleed, essentially, because you are so much more tapped in. And our brain wave states are actually, we get to go in these deeper brainwave states. So we often also have more dreams during our cycle. So we really do become this oracle if we allow ourselves to. A lot of the times we don't allow ourselves to, because we don't give ourselves that rest or time away from the world. But yeah, it's such a potent time. And I wish more women would realize that.
can you share more about the chambers? That's so interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. So the first chamber is separation. And so the separation chamber is all about, this is right before our bleed. So when we're like at the very end of our luteal phase, and you probably have maybe experienced this for yourself, where you're just like, I truly just want to separate myself from the world and just want to, yeah, you're like, it's being in the void of being like, I know my bleed's about to come and I just can't wait for this release. I have to separate myself from the world. So that's the first chamber. And so with all these chambers, just before I dive deeper into them, it's when you honor each of them and honor what they are, they can meet you there. And that's when you find, that's when the potency of your bleed is able to really come to light. So when you're like, okay, let me really honor that I need separation from the world during this time, it'll be a lot easier to then come into the next chambers and then really go through this vision quest in itself. Then chamber two is release. So this is day one of your period, the big release. And I'm sure you've also experienced this where it's kind of like this breath of fresh air. Okay, I can relax now. It's releasing. And really all we were asked to do during that time is just allow ourselves to surrender and release. Then chamber three is all about renewal. So this is really when we start feeling those like first stirrings of our inner spring, which comes with our estrogen that starts to rise around like day 3 or 4. And so we slowly start feeling that, but really just still allowing ourselves to rest in that. Chamber four is visioning. And so visioning is all about, like I was saying earlier, just becoming the oracle and really, yeah, just tuning into that thin veil, understanding any questions that we might have. This is something that I always talk about is bleed on it. If there's something that you are unsure about, especially in your luteal phase, I always say don't make any big decisions in your luteal phase. You need to bleed on it, and then you then have your answer. And so chamber four is really all about that, like getting the answers, getting the clarity that you're searching for. And then chamber five is clarity and direction. And this is really when we're in that transition, like the transition day between inner winter and inner spring. So coming out of it, menstruation into our follicular phase and like having the clarity and the direction of where we want to take this next cycle and like the intention of that next cycle. And I always say this is really the perfect time to set your intentions for this next cycle, what it is that you want to focus on or what it is that you want to call in. Yeah. And then really being able to hold that for yourself throughout the cycle. And that's really how we can honor our cycle throughout the month too. It's just like coming back to that intention, having that be the anchor. But yeah, so those are the 5 chambers. There's obviously much more, but that's like the the simple version of it, I guess you could say.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm excited to intentionally try that. I feel like naturally I'm kind of, when I'm really in tune, am doing that, but I've
Hmm.
never heard of that, so it's gonna be fun to play with it.
Yeah, yeah. And most women say that when they learn about the cycle or the chambers, they're always like, this is naturally what you go through. And now it's just, there's just, I guess, a structure to it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another point I wanted to add too was that releasing part is I've, released exes or
Mm.
past partners, and that's such a good time. And I remember the last time I did it, it was like a year ago for my last partner, and it I don't ever get cramps, I don't have any symptoms, but I was like, okay, we're gonna release this time. And I felt so much happening in my womb, and it's just so
Mhm.
powerful how she responds. And so
Yeah.
I love that, like taking that time to what do I want to release is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Yeah. That you can really ask your womb to help you release anything. It's just being intentional and having that relationship with her, and especially exes and partners or people that you've been sexually active with. It's like there is energetically that is stored in your womb. And so I've experienced that too, where there's just a heavier bleed after a separation with someone. And yeah, and it's so crazy when you start tuning into that, you're like, this wasn't my energy to hold. And I
Mm.
can feel my womb wanting to release it for me and help me release it for me because it's not serving me anymore. Yeah, and giving her permission to do that. I mean, I release this. I don't want to carry this anymore. It's not mine to hold or to carry. Yeah.
It's so crazy. And do you know much about like how we take on, you're kind of just saying a little bit about it, but like when we're being penetrated, like we're taking on their energies, right? And their everything.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And this is, I've I've studied this a little bit through a womb course that I did, and she says that you can hold on to these energies for 7 years. Naturally, it'll be a 7-year process unless you intentionally do a womb release. And so I think most women don't realize that maybe they're holding on to a lot of energies from past partners that aren't theirs, and that in itself can also yeah, it can often lead to you feeling certain things that aren't even yours to feel. And in that, I also want to note that that's the 7 year mark is something that within that they say that every 7 years our cells also renew, which I find really interesting that that's the mark that she was sharing, my mentor at the time. But yeah, this is why I think womb work is so important too, because you can allow yourself to release the things that don't serve you anymore without realizing you're still holding on to it. And that often, if we're in a new partnership with someone, no, like realizing that those energies can somehow influence that new partnership too. So really intentionally and consciously separating yourself from the other person in these ways is really important. I do have a womb clearing ebook that goes through practices to essentially exactly this practice of clearing any old partners from your womb. It's linked in my bio if anyone's interested, but it is a really, really beautiful and sacred practice to just really be like, okay, I want to feel cleared from anything that doesn't serve me, essentially.
My love, you've built a life, you've built the career, you've built the success. But when it comes to love and softening and receiving, you're always the one in control, always thinking, planning, and doing. What if you didn't have to? Soft Girl Season is your invitation to melt into life where you feel safe, supported, and adored, where you actually can trust men, trust God, and trust yourself. Inside, women have found their dream partners, started receiving clients with less effort, and watched their men step up to pamper, cherish, and adore them, all by learning how to soften into their feminine energy. They've gone from feeling numb and guarded to magnetic, deeply loved, and radiant. So if you're ready to stop over functioning and start being treated like a queen, come inside Soft Girl Season and let yourself be the woman who has it all. Join us using the link in the show notes and receive instant access and start being provided for by God and men.
Yes, I hope, yeah, you guys should definitely hop on that because we need to, like you were just saying, especially when you want to enter a new partnership, like you gotta let go of that old. So there's really the spaciousness in the womb.
Mhm.
And even thinking like ancestral. I mean,
Yeah,
who knows
yeah,
what we're carrying from that.
totally. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It really is such important work. And with that too, I guess one more thing I'll say about that is like when you're when you have like energetically someone else's energy within your womb, it causes confusion and causes you not to be as clear in your intuition. And so with someone who has had multiple sexual partners in the past and they've never consciously cleared that, and this is not to ever shame anyone for having multiple sexual partners, it's all good in that, but it's just knowing that if you're wanting to have clear intuition for yourself and you feel there is some blockage, like just looking into that and seeing what am I holding here, if is this blocking me from being in my, yeah, just being clear and grounded in myself.
Yeah, so good. And something that was making me think, I kind of want to transition to getting pregnant and how a lot
Mm,
of women don't understand that it is that 5 days and the mucus and all of this since we're talking about sex. So I know a lot of women are trying to prevent or they're trying to conceive, but
mhm.
I kind of love to go in then to that area.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, plot twist, we can't get pregnant every single day of the month, which sex ed never told us. And so really what every woman has her unique fertile windows, we call it, but we can only really get pregnant 5 to 6 days out of the month because sperm can only survive around that length of time, 5 to 6 days. And so when we're tracking our cervical mucus, we're really tracking if we're fertile. So without cervical mucus present, sperm can't survive. And so our vagina is actually a really like a hostile place for sperm because it's too acidic for sperm to survive. So the cervical mucus is what is needed in order for sperm to actually be able to survive. And then with that, fertilize the egg. And so the closer that we get to ovulation, our bodies are primed to want to get pregnant. That's just from a survival standpoint, that's what our bodies are primed to do, right? So the closer that we get to ovulation, the more cervical mucus is going to be produced. And so this is what we call our fertile window. So we can have our fertile window be around 5 to 6 days right before ovulation. And so when we're tracking our cervical mucus, we're just tracking, what is present, what kind of cervical mucus is present. And the more watery, translucent, like raw egg whitey that cervical mucus gets, the more fertile we are essentially. And so, when we're tracking that, that's really a way of a contraception method or a conception method, depending on what your goals are. And I also will say, it's even if you don't have a partner right now, just doing this, if you're a single woman and you're wanting to, if you're like, this doesn't make sense for me to start tracking because I don't have a partner, actually, it really does, because it is, well, one, it's one of the best ways to start tracking right now, because there's no outside, like arousal fluid a lot of times can like mess up your readings with cervical mucus, and your hormones can start shifting with a partner. So really learning your own fertile pattern now without a partner is so important. And it also allows you to just understand yourself better through your cycle, understanding what your fertility health is like. Are you ovulating regularly? Are you ovulating at a good time in your cycle? Is it too late, too early? How long is your luteal phase? All these different things, so that let's say, whenever you are ready to have a child, you have already started your fertility journey so far ahead by just really taking care of your health and your womb and your cycle, so that when that time does come, you're ready to go and you don't have to worry about, creating an environment that is really safe and healthy for a child to conceive. So, I don't know if that answers your questions or anything else that you want me to dive into.
Yeah, that's great. And I also want to talk about maybe mucus throughout the month. There was this one product that was sold to me that's, use this so that you have no discharge. And I was like, well,
yeah. Well, okay. One thing I will note is discharge and cervical mucus are two separate things, which often we just call cervical mucus discharge too, because it's just the easy thing to say. But discharge is your vagina cleaning itself, and then that's what we see. So, but it's different. Cervical mucus is just a sign of fertility, I guess you could say. So essentially, within our menstrual phase, we're obviously bleeding. Then after we stop bleeding, we might have a few dry days, and then we start producing cervical mucus. And that cervical mucus can start off as more like sticky or creamy. And then the closer we get to ovulation, it'll get more translucent. So it'll get more wet or egg white, or it'll be that creamy opaqueness. So just more translucent, more watery, I guess you could say. Then after ovulation, you'll start experiencing more dry days, or you might experiencing a little bit of stickiness. So that's really how we know ovulation has happened, because we're not experiencing that fertile cervical mucus anymore. And then obviously also with that, I personally really like to track my basal body temperature, and I also have my clients do that, because basal body temperature is great to track to confirm that ovulation has happened, but it can't tell you that you're actually in your fertile phase. So this is why I always suggest pairing it with cervical mucus tracking, because basal body temperature is just a way to then confirm, okay, I have ovulated. And the way that we confirm that is because your temperature will rise after ovulation, because your progesterone starts rising. And so not relying on just basal body temperature, but pairing that with cervical mucus, especially because you don't know it's just really necessary if you're actually using this as a birth control method, I guess, using cervical mucus as like the first point of data and information.
yeah, it's just so fascinating how wise our bodies are. And I
Yeah.
remember as a little girl, I had so much shame around that, like looking in my panties and being like, oh, there's something wrong with me, and not knowing and not telling anyone because I felt so much shame. And then
Mhm.
fast forward years, I'm like, oh wow, this is actually my body being wise and sharing information with me.
Exactly. And it's the sign of health and fertility. It's without that, if we don't have any cervical mucus presence, there's something wrong. We're probably not ovulating. When we're not ovulating, that means our hormones are not balanced. If our hormones are not balanced, something's wrong with our health. So it's really vital for us to experience cervical mucus. It's really that, it's a symbol of absolute health. So yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
And you were talking about feminine archetypes, so I'd love to learn a little bit more about those in your cycle.
Yeah, I love teaching about these. I think this is one of the things that often, it's like the missing puzzle piece for a lot of women that have already learned about cycle tracking. but it just brings more of this relatability, because essentially the way that I teach about the archetypes is just teaching about these different versions of ourselves that show up throughout our cycle. And so I guess to just give you a rundown of these different archetypes that I work with. So when we look at our follicular phase, the archetype attached to that is very much the maiden. And the maiden is all about innocence and curiosity and understanding who are we in the world, and like how can the world serve us, and yeah, and really being this like light-hearted, flowy, joyous self in that way. Just very much maiden energy. And then we're moving into our ovulation phase. The archetype attached to that is the mother. And the mother is really all about knowing herself in the world. How can she serve the world? How can she be in this creative, or allow this creative life force energy to come about and then serve the world, which is obviously what we're experiencing in ovulation, is this life force energy, which is the core of creation, and really harnessing that through understanding the mother archetypes and her qualities. And then moving into the luteal phase, we have the sorceress, and the sorceress is like really the guardian of our shadow world. And often times our luteal phase can be really difficult because a lot of emotions come to the surface, a lot of just a lot of different things that we might not really want to deal with. And so the sorceress, if we allow ourselves to really tap into the qualities of the sorceress and seeing that she's all about transmuting pain into magic and power. And within the sorcerers, we also have the sub-archetypes. The wild woman is one of them. The wild woman being just like the woman that really allows herself to experience this feral wildness that often our society suppresses in women, right? And the sorceress is also very much like a dark feminine archetype, which again, the light feminine archetypes, like the maiden and the mother, those are very much supported in our society, but the dark feminine archetypes are neglected. Like that wild woman, the one that understands the shadow world, her being this mystic. That's one of the other sub-archetypes of the luteal phase, and just really allowing her to understand her shadow world in this way where she doesn't have to neglect or suppress it, but she can fully immerse herself in it. So yeah, really learning about these archetypes. And then the menstrual phase is the crone, and the crone is really the wise woman that is just really able to harness this wisdom that lies within her, and also has a more lightheartedness around that, and just being like, I know this is the end of a cycle, the beginning of the cycle, and I can see the magic and the potent essence and all of that. So these are the archetypes in short. And the cool thing about this is that when we're moving through within a lifespan of a woman, we move through all these different archetypes. We move from maiden to mother, mother to sorceress, and then sorceress to crone. We move through that. And so when we commune with these different archetypes throughout our cycle, when we transition to these different archetypes within our life, it's going to be a lot easier, especially maiden to mother, but also mother to sorceress. Like moving into the sorceress is menopausal years within our lifespan. And that is really hard for a lot of women too, because we've, again, been taught to neglect these aspects of ourselves. And so it really brings this balanced approach to just seeing ourselves in all these different versions, and how all of them are so necessary and so valuable in their own ways. And so when we're transitioning through that within our life, we can there's less resistance, there's more surrendering in that, and more grace, I guess you could say too.
Yeah, I'm hearing like you can accept all parts of yourself so much more, and the understanding of, oh, this part of me is okay. This like darkness is actually like support, it's part of me.
Yeah,
And that's such a good like permission slip to honor the phases. I feel like you were saying like the wild woman is shamed, or you're being too much, and it's like this constant suppression we're being told, instead of to embrace these parts.
exactly. Yeah, embrace them, and not seeing that there's anything wrong with you, like coming into your luteal phase, for instance, and that you're experiencing all these like heavier emotions, and that something is wrong with you. No, this is okay, and it's natural to feel these ways. And instead of resisting and neglecting it, just meeting yourself there and allowing the qualities of these archetypes to support you in doing so, to really find more balance in feeling these things too. Yeah,
Yeah, it's so helpful. That I think archetypes are always so fun to incorporate in everything,
for sure.
to give you more
Yeah,
visual and understanding.
For sure. Yeah. It creates more relatability too. Yeah.
And this also is making me think, if you have a partner, how can you have them support you in each phase? What are some things you can ask for from your partner?
Mm. Yeah, it's such a beautiful question. I think just cueing them in, first of all, of like where you're at in your cycle helps a lot. It's fun to have a partner cycle track with you. Also, just so they can know, okay, when are you in your fertile phase? If we're not trying to make a baby here, how can I support you in that? How can we, have the same goal and mission in mind? And in that, I have to understand your body too. And that obviously in itself, like him understanding your body in this way creates such a stronger connection and bond between you two. So that in itself, just cueing him in where you're at when you're in your fertile phase, cueing him in when you're about to ovulate. And in that too, being like, okay, I'm about to ovulate. Let's go on a date. Let's have more sex, but be careful with it. Let's whatever else, be more social, and just knowing that I am I'm more open to play, and I want you to play with me essentially. And then coming into your luteal phase, allowing him to know that okay, you're needing more space, you're more inward, and him or her not taking it to it has nothing to do with him. It's literally just has to do with her own internal process, right? And then during the menstrual phase, if he can, really supporting you with maybe making you a meal or just really massaging your feet or just giving you more space than usual, whatever else it may be. But I think just cueing them in with where exactly you are in your cycle in itself just allows them to understand you better, and then also not take certain things personally if you're like not in the mood to have sex, or you're you're a little more moody or whatever else it may be. I think it can just create like the foundation of your relationship will just become that much more stronger if you do that.
Yeah, there was the first time I experienced that was my last partner, and he was so just his whole world, his world opened up. He's I didn't know any of this. This is so helpful. I can love you better. I can support
Mm-hmm.
you more. And he actually incorporated it into his business, which I thought was so
Oh, wow.
for his employees. And so I just think like a lot of men want to know, but they don't know what they don't know. And they just, yeah, it's like the more you can kind of educate them in a way where they can hear you, it can just,
Yeah,
like you said, it supports your relationship so much more.
totally. Well, and also just noting that men want to provide, they want you to
Yes.
feel happy and safe and seen. And so if you hide that part, like about your cycle, about yourself, you're hiding a big part of yourself, you know? And so they don't know how to then show up and provide for you. You have to be clear on that. You have to tell them, like, this is what I'm experiencing in this part of the month. And so in that, they can then better provide for you. Like men innately want to do that. So let them do it. Let them help you, you know?
So cute. They really do.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the tracking a lot, but is there anything you like, how do you track or what do you recommend for your clients? Is it just
Yeah. I personally really suggest doing pen to paper tracking, because if you have an app, I think apps can be great, but they're very disconnecting because all you're doing is, pressing a few buttons, but you're not, the pen to paper just creates that much more connection with yourself. And the intention with cycle tracking is coming back into your body. And so pen to paper can help with that. I have a free cycle tracker in my linked in my bio for anyone that wants to download that and then print it. But that's kind of what that's what I share with my clients. And I also suggest having just like a cycle journal, because sometimes like the cycle tracker that I have, it's very, you can only really put in bullet points of how you're feeling, but some days you want to share a little more, or you want to journal a little more about what you're feeling, what comes up, or a cycle sign that you're experiencing. And so having a designated cycle journal where you're just tracking every single day in that way, I think can be super helpful. So that's what I have too, a cycle journal. It is my goal to create a cycle journal for Blume Womb within the next, I don't know, 6 months to a year. We'll see how fast it goes. But yeah, I'm hoping to create something to just be able to then share with my clients, and obviously whoever else wants a cycle journal to keep cycle consistently in that way.
so beautiful? I think just in general, like pen to paper is you're saying it's so good, and we're on technology so much anyway, so it's let's like take that time and write.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's creating more of a grounded relationship in that way. Yeah.
And a question that just was coming into my head was like, what are some things you can do with your girlfriends like when you're bleeding? Like, is there like, have you ever done that before? I don't know. It just like, can you have a bleed party or something cute like that?
Yeah, like a more of a ceremonial thing where,
Mm.
yeah, I kind of bleed at the same time as my girlfriends, but not really. We're always a few days off, or we're on the opposite cycle. So I'll be bleeding, the other one will be ovulating. I'm like, we really need to fix this because you're wanting to go out and be more social, and I wanted to stay in. Like, our social calendars are not aligning right now. But then there are a few of my girlfriends where we are like ovulating around the same time, and so we're like on the same wavelength, which is always so fun. But yeah, I would say honestly, personally, when I am bleeding, I like to just be by myself. But if there's a way of almost like having a red tent with your girlfriends, I think could be really such a beauty, which I haven't done yet. But if if you guys don't know what the red tent is, it's the like back in the old days, women would bleed together and they'd go into a tent. And because they're all in the same cycle, like they were able to bleed together and then really just take these few days to rest and be with each other in a very sacred space. And then all the coming of age women that have had yet to start their cycle, they were the one that would take care of them and bring them food and nurture them, massage them, and they would be in this red tent and also bleed into the earth, which I think is so beautiful, which obviously we don't really do anymore. So that I think in itself, if you're able to do, you could do this with your girlfriends, having a red tent situation where you're all bringing maybe a dish to share so that you all feel nourished in that way, and then somehow giving your blood back to the earth. I know that there's a lot of women that have also done like artwork with their blood where they're painting something through their with their blood, or even doing, I know face masks is a big thing. I've done that a few times. I don't honestly don't do that every single time I bleed, but I know that there's so many good stem cells in your blood. I personally just love giving my blood back to the earth. That's like my ritual I do every single time. I try to give as much back as possible. But yeah, incorporating rituals like that, I think it'd be really so beautiful, and doing that with your girlfriends if you somehow do bleed together, then
That,
yeah, that works out.
that's so fun. I know it'd be cool to bring back the red tent vibe and just see
I
how that
know.
feels.
Yeah, it'd be so special for sure.
Sure. And that made me think also of, are you in, do you know about like when you bleed on the full moon or the new moon, like what that means?
Yeah, they they say it means certain things. So that anyone that bleeds on the full moon, because the full moon is actually like if you look back to the olden days, we would ovulate with the full moon because all the qualities of the full moon is very all about creation, bringing things into the world. And because of light pollution, we now don't ovulate or bleed with the moon anymore. And if you're looking, so backtracking, if you're looking at the new moon, all the qualities of new moons are very much menstrual phase qualities of being more inward. It's the death and the rebirth, end in the start of a new cycle. And so women used to then bleed with the new moon, and that's how they would track their fertile period. I was watching Bridgerton. I don't know if you watched Bridgerton the other day, and yeah, and they were talking about there. I don't know. They made a comment about, oh, full moon's about to be there. In order to have a child, essentially go have sex. I was like, that's literally what they used to do in the olden days. They just use the moon to track their cycle. But eventually, when it comes to what it means, I know that it used to be like the witches would bleed with the full moon because it was not the right thing to do, I guess you could say. But I think these days I don't really put meaning to it anymore. I personally wouldn't, just because we're not in alignment with the moon anymore as much. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't know
Yeah.
what it means either, but I wasn't sure if there was any significance of it.
Yeah.
But I am curious, like, how is it that you, every time I'm around some of my girlfriends, we go on a trip, we do start bleeding around the same time. And what is that about?
I think it's a survival thing a little bit of being like, okay, like being able to, yeah, bleed together, and so that we're on the same track. I think on a hormonal standpoint, it's kind of like pheromones where you're picking up on that, and then your body's okay, we have to sync up here. I think just from when we were back in tribes, it was all bleeding together and then being able to work together in that way and being on the same cycle, I think just assisted and supported the tribe. That's how I understood it. But yeah, exactly. It's like you picking up on their scent and their pheromones, and your body picks up on it, and then they're like, okay, let's start bleeding. It's so crazy that we do that. It's just, we're so magical in that way.
I know. Yeah. Every time I've lived with some girlfriends, we always sync up, like at least a few months in. It's so crazy to me.
It's so cool. Yeah, it's
So cool.
amazing.
Okay, so the last question of the podcast is, what is one of your favorite romantic memories or dates?
Wow, I love this question. It's a good question. I honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is like a date that I had with my high school boyfriend, where it was such a sweet date where we went to a drive-in movie, and it was just one of those nights where you're just in high school and you're just so in love, and you think that this is the world and this is the only love you'll ever experience. And it was just such like innocent, sacred love. And we went to a drive-in movie, and then I had a Jeep at the time, and then we ended up having sex in the car after. And it was such a cute little it was such a cute little romantic thing. That was like the first memory that came to mind. I'm sure I've have memories from like more current, but yeah, that was such a core memory in my brain.
I love those. Yeah, always trust
Yeah.
the person that comes. It's so fun.
Yeah,
It's so funny. Yeah, every time. Once again, our intuition full circle. You got to just trust that memory that came up.
totally. Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
do that. I feel like summertime is such a good time. I haven't done a drive-in movie in so long, so that
I
sounds
know.
cute.
Yeah, it's such a cute thing. They don't have them really here on Maui, but yeah.
For anyone that wants to work with you or learn more about you, what are you offering and where can they find you?
Yeah, so I do offer one-on-one coaching in which we really dive into your unique cycle and see any challenges or struggles that you have. Yeah, and really work through that together. And then I have a retreat coming up end of August, which is, yeah, it's a women's retreat, really diving into womb work as well as working with the different archetypes that I was just talking about. That is going to be hosted at the Luna Healing Center in California. And then I am in the middle of building out a platform in group coaching programs, so stay tuned for that. And I also have multiple little ebooks in my bio to help you cycle track, and then also the womb healing ebook too. Yeah, that's it for now, but there's so much more coming.
Yay! Thank you so much. It was so lovely to learn from you, and I'm excited to, yeah, for anyone that's listening, make sure to ask us any questions or share your comments with us.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
You made it to the end of the episode, so now it's time for our snuggly heart breath of the day. Place a hand or both hands, if it's safe to do so, over your heart and take a big breath into your heart center. Open your mouth and let it go. I'm so grateful to have shared this time with you. If you enjoyed this convo, please share with your besties and your fam. And if you're a visual person like me, fly over to YouTube and watch the video. If you want to do a random act of kindness today, please leave a 5-star review so more people in the world can get their heart snuggled. You're helping tremendously when you do this, so thank you so much. And as a gift for doing so, I'll give you my Soften Your Heart Medi that feels like an exhale and a hug from within. When you leave a review and email me the screenshot to heartsnuggles@alivetoenjoy.com, you can also find the email in the show notes and you'll get the free meditation. Sending you the warmest, comfiest hug and lots of unexpected blessings your way. Remember that every single person just wants to be loved. So how can you be loved today?